أترجاكم كلام ماري.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله، صلى الله عليك وعلى آل بيتك الطاهرين. لعن الله الظالمين لكم من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما. قال الله تعالى في محكم كتابه العزيز: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هذه سبيلي أدعو إلى الله على بصيرة أنا ومن تبعني وسبحان الله وما أنا من المشركين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. In our day-to-day life, in the life that we live now, we are pretty much bombarded with different ideologies, with different concepts, with everything is not what it seems to be. The world that we live in currently is dominated by what we call the mainstream media, be it the news channels, be it the movie-making places, Hollywood, Bollywood, what have you, be it the music industry, the entertainment industry. These are the tools which are now being used to manipulate the minds and the beliefs of people. Now, with the help of social media, for example, and the entertainment industry, now it's very difficult for a person to make up his own mind without the interference of someone else making his mind for him. Right now, we are being subjected to such a vicious campaign that tries to steal our capacity, our ability to think independently. There are those who are behind the curtains, call them what you like. They are trying to seek access to your brain without your permission. From day one, they get involved in your life, right? They get in the life of your parents before you, and so on and so forth. Now, when we have a child who comes into this world that we currently live in, from a young age, we hand him a device in his hand, and we open the internet to him and say to him, there you go, start. And then he gets sucked in from games to movies to entertainment to what have you, to a world beyond limits, a scroll, a limitless scroll. You keep going up, it never ends. The problem with that is it affecting our capacity to think, that's one. And two, it's playing and tampering with our beliefs that we take for granted. So now the war is not what seems to be as before. Where before, in order to invade a country, you need to take an army, an arsenal, weapons. You go invade. It costs money. It costs lives. But now they realized that war doesn't have to be physical. It could be soft war, right? This is what we call the soft war, or like they had the Cold War. So this soft war is where they invade you in your own privacy, in your own home, at your own time with your own will. And they could manipulate and play with your mind, play with your ideology, and they get away with it. That's where the danger falls in. Now, as Muslims, as believers, as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, we have certain beliefs we need to keep intact. We need to keep them firm. Now, the enemy is always working day and night, trying to steal that belief from you, or at least tampering with it, or at least playing with it, directing your attention somewhere else. Let me give you some examples so this picture becomes more clear. What's being used now in the media, in the mainstream media, they try to take very beautiful, fancy terms, and they stripping it from its actual meaning. For example, when it comes to freedom, freedom is a beautiful concept that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants everyone to be free. Free in the sense that they make their own choices, not being oppressed by others. That's the concept of freedom. That you have the freedom to practice what you believe on your own accord. That you are a person who owns his own will, not owned by someone else. Now, when it comes to the media, for example, the media comes along and says to you, well, wearing a hijab is oppression, is holding you, putting you in a cage. You need to be free. Free yourself, throw your hijab off. So now the definition of freedom, not that you are free to practice what you believe, now it's being given a different name. It's been given a different definition, right? That's one. Two, under the name of freedom, under the slogan of freedom, wearing too much clothes, covering your entire body, that's oppression. Why are you oppressing yourself? Allah gave you this beautiful body, then why you not show it? Why are you covering it? This is oppression. You need to free yourself. Be naked, be semi-naked. Now, being semi-naked, or being almost naked, or being naked completely, now this is freedom. The same term is being given a different way of looking at it. When we look, for example, at oppression, dhulm, right? It takes many forms. For example, slavery. Back in the day, people invade another place, take slaves, sell them, trade them, and the slave industry. Now the same thing is happening with a different name, right? Now they might not be selling people, even though the trade still exists, but now they're putting people under what we call them is they sanctions. You sanction an entire continent, you sanction an entire country, an entire group, and you turn them into slaves. The same concepts apply. But the media now have a way of manipulating the minds of people, right? When it comes to us as Muslims, for example, there are certain things we hold firm to. One amongst many is that we are followers of our imams, right? So we follow the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. We are followers of the Ahlul Bayt. Wherever the Ahlul Bayt say goes. The Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, they gave us the concept of taqleed, the concept of following a scholar, following a marja, a person who studied and he done his studies and he has the capacity and the ability to extract Islamic laws from the Quran and from the Hadith, from the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's logic, and logic dictates that you need to ask those who are professionals or they have a profession in their field. If you need to seek medication, you go to a doctor. If you need to seek to build a house, you need to go to an engineer and so on, and a builder and so on and so forth. This is what logic tells you. But now you have the media comes along and says to you, you know what? Why should you follow a marja when you could do it yourself? No need to follow. Just go read. Everything is there. Why follow a marja? No, don't follow a marja. Be a free thinker. Be a free intellectual. Make your own choices. Make your own thoughts. Develop your own ability to think. Don't follow marja. This is just blind following. This is rejected. And under that banner, all of a sudden you see the beliefs of people are being changed. It's like, oh yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. Why should I follow marja? Let me follow myself. I can read the Quran. I can read the hadith. The hadith clearly says like this. And then they bring you example of how, for example, a specific fatwa from a specific marja goes against the hadith of the Ahl Bayt salamullah alayhim. While they hide, they conceal the others. So it makes sense. You say, okay, that makes sense. Let me follow them. And then all of a sudden we have a new generation who their ideologies are being tempered with, being played with. They're not what they seem to be anymore. And because the fact that the majority of people, sadly these days, are not giving themselves enough time to get themselves educated, it's very easy to manipulate their minds. Now, if you want to convince someone, it's a matter of showing them a video clip of 2 minutes. That's it. Or even sometimes even 1 minute. You can see a clip of 1 minute and you're convinced you have a complete new ideology. That's how easy it is. At the same time, that's how dangerous it is. So the Ahl Bayt salamullah alayhim, they said to us, you need to have what we call basira. You need to have an insight. A Muslim, a follower of the Ahl Bayt alayhim as-salam, he must be aware of what's going on around him. If he's not, then he has lost. He has lost his faith. Most of our youth and the young ones are losing their faith because they haven't got their own ideology to begin with, and they being bombarded with this mainstream media. They do not question, that they follow blindly. And obviously this is not as simple as I say it, but it has a lot of, there's a lot of people working in the background. But when it comes to the Ahl Bayt, they said to us, ye need to have an insight. Question everything that you see. Don't take it for granted. When you see something online, when you get a video clip of something, because someone holds a paper, because someone says this news said so and this channel said so, doesn't make it right. Because now we get to believe that it's not the proof, the actual proof that matters. Now what matters is how could you convince people to do what you like. For example, when this whole virus thing happened, in some countries, even in Australia, they brought in an image or a video clip that happened in Italy 6 months ago. They're playing it right now in Australia as it's happening today in Australia. And the masses are falling for it. So it's very easy to deceive people on a global scale and have the beliefs changed. So now the war is on my belief and your belief. They're trying to find out a way where they could deprive me and you of our own beliefs. That's where we need to have what? An insight. The ayah that I began with says, basiratun. I need to have that insight where I know what I'm doing. I know where I am. I know what's happening around me. I'm not blind. Because sometimes the things that we do are the things that affect us the most because we don't pay attention to it. When it comes to games, playing games, they're not innocent at all. They're 100% guilty. They are loaded and bombarded with things to deprive you of your belief. When you look at the movies, they are nothing but a machine to take and suck your beliefs away. The entertainment system not only takes your money, but it takes your logic away. And that's why we have a generation of zombies. They can't think for themselves. They can't do anything. All they can do is just waste time. Nothing productive. Nothing creative. The Ahl Bayt alayhim as-salam, they fought against this concept of having someone tampering with your mind. Give you examples that happened back then that still continues today. Muawiyah convinced people, Muawiyah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala curse him, through his campaign, through his advertisement, through the media that he used to have back in the day, poetry, speakers, preachers, he managed to convince the masses that Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, the first Muslim and the cousin of the Prophet, his brother, the husband of his daughter, and you all know who Amir al-Mu'mineen. Muawiyah managed to convince the masses that Amir al-Mu'mineen was non-believer, God forbid. When the news came to Sham, to Syria, that Imam Ali was killed in his mihrab, in his prayer place in the masjid, people will start questioning. They said, Ajib, amazing, Ali prays? That's how he managed to manipulate the masses. And that manipulation continued until today, where people still don't understand what's going on. People do not question. They take everything for granted. When you are presented with an information, you have to tell yourself, it could be wrong. There's a chance that it is wrong. When we say mainstream media, it means what? It means there is something that is minimum. That's not main. That is little. How about you check that out? Because maybe the mainstream media is the one that is wrong, because obviously they're trying to manipulate the truth, the reality of things. So you need to do back what? You need to go back to that which is hidden. Now, anything that is mainstream media is considered to be a fact, and anything that is not, even though it's true, is considered to be a conspiracy. So if you say, well, no, this is not how it is, they say, no, this is a conspiracy theory. You're a lunatic. You're crazy. Right? You get labeled names. You need to follow the crowd. You need to follow the sheep. Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, they said to us, that should not happen to the believers. That should not happen to the followers. The followers should be awake on their guard. For example, I gave you the example that now we have to deal with, that people saying, well, don't follow a marja. Why should you follow a marja? Read it for yourself. You can do it. No, you can't. In the same way, I can say to you, go treat yourself if you're sick. Why do you think that you can go and follow yourself when it comes to religion? In the same way that there's practitioners when it comes to medicine, there are also practitioners when it comes to deen. So Islam, or the Quran itself, is like a book that has all the knowledge. Some you can understand, some you can't. When it comes to physics and chemistry, for example, I could give you the book that has all the physics and the chemistry in it, all the math equation in it. But can you read yourself? Could you educate yourself? Of course you don't. You need a teacher. So why is it with everything else we require a teacher? When it comes to Islam, when it comes to religion, no, you can do it ourselves. So you have to be very mindful of these things. When it comes, for example, to our beliefs, when it comes to, I spoke about this a few nights before, when it comes to our majalis, for example. Also, people say to you, why should you do it? The time is past, move on. No, it's not that easy. So we need to pay attention to what's happening around us. The events that happens, we need to read them thoroughly. We need to be educated. We need to understand what's going on. Because God forbid that one day, if my iman, if my belief keeps going weaker and weaker and weaker, I will leave this faith. Those who became atheists, those who became Christians, for example, or different faiths, how did that happen? They did not just one day woke up and said, well, I want to be an atheist. That's a process of convincing them. Why should you need a tyrannic lord who tells you what to do? Live free, enjoy yourself. And that these slogans, they managed to convince people that there is no God, that God does not exist, or God is a tyrant, God forbid, or God does not want you to be happy, and so on and so forth. They managed to do that by manipulating the media for their own advantage, and we are following what? We are falling for their trap. So Ahl Bayt alayhim salam, they said, you need to have basira. You need to be able to have an insight that when you see the truth, you can tell that's truth. When you see it wrong, you can say that's wrong. And even the Prophet ﷺ said, it will come a time where everything will be as dark as a black cloud, where people cannot tell who they are, where they are. And he said, at this time, people need to go back to the Quran, because the Quran holds what? Absolute truth, unchangeable, undeniable truth. You need to refer back to that, right? And the Quran itself, it has those who interpret and explain it. And those are the imams. You need to hold on to those. That's it, don't go anywhere else. Any other path you take, you have lost. You've been misguided. So even the Ahl Bayt Salamullah alayhim, in their dua, we always pray after salah, we say, Allahumma as'alika taj'al an-nura fi basari wal basirata fi dini. Oh Allah, I ask you to put the lights in my eyes and the insight in my religion. I need to understand what's happening. I need to understand what's going on. I need to be able to tell right from wrong, truth from falsehood. Otherwise, they get to do whatever they want to do with us, and we fall victims to it. That one generation goes away, second goes away, third goes away, and everything disappears. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, his whole aim of his revolution was to get people to think and have an insight. That's it. That's if I could summarize the whole message of Imam Hussein. Insight. Because Imam Hussein, was he fighting atheists? Was he fighting the Crusaders? Was he fighting the Chinese? He was fighting his own people. Those who he was praying, they were praying. But they were so convinced that Imam al-Hussein was not just wrong, they were convinced that Imam Hussein was going to hellfire, God forbid. When he asked for water, one of them said to him, you will not drink water until you enter hell. So this person had this belief, this conviction that the Imam was a misguided person, that the Imam is not even a Muslim, that he's going to hell, that he deserves to be killed. That's how the media back then managed to convince those people. Otherwise, he was fighting Muslims. He wasn't fighting people from a different planet. He wasn't fighting Martians. No, he was fighting Muslims from his own people who take his grandfather as their prophet. You can see how much Muawiyah played on the minds of these people. And God forbid, if me and you don't have that insight, we could be the enemies of our Imam of our time, and we could go against him, do everything that he hates, and we think we are being truthful. When we go against the ulama, for example, and I say, well, who is Fulan, and who is he, or what does he know? He's like, this is me going against the Imam of my time. When the Imam of my time says to me, if you need to refer to your religion, go back to the ulama, go back to the scholars. They say, well, what do they know? They're all, now we call them names. Why? Because it collides with our interest. He says to us, this is haram. I say, well, who says? Maybe this is back in the day. Maybe things have changed now. We live in different times. And you're still telling me halal and haram? So what happens is, we're being bombarded with ways to deprive us from our belief. So therefore, we need to do what? When we are faced with a problem, when we see something, we need to tell ourselves, ask ourselves, is this true or not? Don't take everything as 100%, unless you question it, all right? And make sure that get this information checked out, from the expert. And then you need to find out a way where you can protect yourself when it comes to the beliefs that you have. Reinforce them. Because these days, any concept that you have, someone could come and simply, they can play around with it and change it and take it away and deprive you from that, right? So we need to be among those who have insight. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, if we go back to Karbala, he had the insight of his time. He understood that him staying at home, doing nothing, will cause religion to fall apart. Not by name. By name, everyone is a Muslim. By definition, everyone is a Muslim. Praying-wise, everyone is praying. But people being deprived of their essential belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where everything is not what it seems, Until today, we have people when they read the Quran, when they read Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Yadullah fawqa aydihim, Allah's hand is above their hand, they say Allah has a literal hand. And we are living in the 21st century. They say Allah has a living hand. And how do they manage to do that? Through all these centuries. Because they managed to manipulate the mind of the masses. And we need to be very aware of that. So Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he had to revolt and he had to lead a revolution so he could state to the people that you need to have an insight. And he was a master of the people who had insight of his time. He studied the circumstances, he studied the political arena, he studied everything, all the dimension, and then he made a move. Even when we read, for example, in the ziyarah of Imam Sadiq when it comes to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, he said he had a basira. He had an insight. When many people went against the Imam, even sometimes there are those who didn't even go with him, Al-Abbas alayhi salam, no, he stood firm. He knew who his Imam was. Even though he was giving very lofty deals to leave Imam Hussein and join the other group. But he had an insight to who his Imam is, to the time that he lives in is. So me and you, brothers and sisters, we need to have that insight. We need to question things. Don't think that what you have today is a gift given to you. These tablets, these phones, the internet, the entertainment, the games, nothing is what it seems. You need to open your eyes. You need to have that insight. Be aware. See how things around you are happening. See who's controlling what. See which army are you on. Because God forbid that I could be on the army of Yazid without realizing. Because the army of Yazid exists in every single time. The same traits exist. Many people who fought Imam Hussein alayhi salam, they did not even understand who Imam Hussein was. So God forbid that I could be fighting the Imam of my time by being oblivious to what's happening around me, by obtaining and believing something that goes against the belief of my Imam. So we need to do what? We need to wake up. We need to realize that the media itself that today is not our friend, rather it's our enemy. It's not to educate you, rather it's trying to misguide you. The mainstream media now and everything in the world now is not Muslim friendly, not a believer friendly. It's all against you. All concepts that have been derived of its own notion and have been given to you with something else. Like I gave you the example of freedom. Now freedom, to be free, throw your hijab off, throw your clothes off, throw your morals off, throw everything that you believe in off, then you're free. That's the concept of freedom that's given to us today. We need to be very aware. We need to go back to Karbala and see how Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his followers, they had the insight of the time that they lived in, that we might learn something from them, so that when we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we say, Arziqni al-basirata fi dini, make me have the insight of my religion, that we, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala might answer that call that we have. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah, rahimakallah ya Aba Abdullah, la'anallahu man qatalak, ولعن الله من شرك في دمك ولعن الله من بلغه ذلك فرضي به أنا إلى الله من ذلك بريء وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وآل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.